I think it's best moving forward if you don't take anything you read on social media or in the press anywhere too seriously regarding reform. I'm not saying this as a supporter. I'm saying this in my normal capacity as a blogger who has stopped people panicking, losing faith, losing hope actually over the last 10 years, because most of it will be exaggerated and done for clickbait. You've got to remember this, it's what I call the Tufton Street Brigade. There's a lot of young men, bloggers particularly, that want to be relevant, that want to earn their living from talking about politics. And, you know, they see it as their destiny. They've nothing else to offer. They can't turn their hand and go and be a plumber. They can't go and be an electrician. They've only got the journalism skills to fall back on. And who can blame them for that? But nevertheless, I do think they tend to be very reactionary, very hot-blooded in how they respond to anything that's going on politically. They never seem to think it through. And they're entitled to their opinion, of course, but it might mislead you down a particular avenue. I generally deal with a slightly older audience who have seen a bit more of life and tend to have a more rational approach. I'm very rational. I would never dream of letting someone's background put me off what I think they can achieve. I know a guy who's a former gypsy who came from a travelling family, settled down, bought a house, learned to read and write. Now, you've got to remember this, he bothered to learn to read and write, even though as an adult he couldn't. And he has basically structured a multi-million-pound business. He employs over 100 people who all seem to be happy with him. They've been with him for years. I won't give his name away. He's been exceptionally good locally with charity, and he's got a good community, a good family, and he deserves to be where he is. But a lot of people are very anti that community. We've never been about masses, have we? We've been about individuals. This is a country where the individual has been able to thrive. That's why I support capitalism. And you mustn't confuse it with corporatism. Capitalism is where every man can be the best he can be. If you want to go and be a hairdresser, be it working in a salon or going mobile, you can do it. And if you want to have a string of salons, you can do that too. If you want to go into engineering, you want to do anything you want, you can do it. You can educate yourself on different formats. It's really quite astounding the opportunities that this country gives to people. But we're afraid. We're a country who is afraid. We're afraid of globalisation because we know it's communism disguised, and we know that number 10 is up for it. That's the problem. And we know the king is up for it. That's an even bigger problem. Those are our main problems. No matter what you're afraid of, whether it's a religion or whether it's unemployment, your biggest problem is what's in number 10 and what sits in Buckingham Palace. Well, it doesn't, does it? You know what I mean? And we have one party that's in the running, in the lead, and we're led to believe by the polls will be the next government. I don't envy that position at all, because they will be attacked from all ends. I mean, Farage is probably used to it. He always has been. He's been on the periphery of the establishment where they've looked down on him, and, you know, they didn't even let him on the Vote Leave bus, did they? Let's face it. The Vote Leave bus, Nigel Farage, who got us the referendum, wasn't allowed on it to get his own bus. That's what the establishment thinks as Nigel Farage. And they haven't changed. The only reason half of them got nicer to him is because he had a TV show and they wanted to go on it, because they all like being on the bloody telly, don't they? So moving on, you're going to hear that much talk about reform, good and bad, moving along. It's going to bamboozle you, confuse you, and probably leave you feeling quite drained. It doesn't have that effect with me because I tend to work things out logically. Sorry, I needed a slurp of tea then. I don't cut my videos for any fancy editing. I do it because my dogs are going to kick off or I'm gagging. The latest go to work is people were assuming Ant Middleton would have been Reform's choice for a London mayoral candidate. I think Ant Middleton's absolutely cracking. I think he's a fearless warrior, but he has made a few mistakes. Mistakes he owns up to. His criminal record for violence against a police officer and a female officer are living proof that that was always going to be a stumbling block as a mayoral candidate. Always. Sad, because he couldn't meet a nicer bloke who's more focused on Britain than someone like Ant Middleton with an astounding military record. Obviously, I sound like I am a fan. I think he's great. But I don't necessarily think he would be the best candidate. Not because he wouldn't be a good mayor. I think he'd probably be an exceptional mayor. But before you get to that, you've got to be the clown that's in. You've got to be that most unsuitable of people, Sadiq Khan. And we all know what he represents. We've known for years. But he's managed to get 3, did I put 2 fingers up? 3 terms of office. He's a tough act to crack. Now, rumour has it that Reform are lining up a new recruit called Layla Cunningham. She was formerly the Tory party candidate for, I think it was Rotherham in the last election, and she stood down in order to let Reform have a better chance, according to reports, in order to let Reform have a better chance of winning, because she's allegedly, according to research that I've done, she's got fed up with the inactivity of her Tory party. Layla is a former Crown prosecutor from the CPS. She also sits on Westminster Council. She's been anti-ULEZ. She's been anti-knife crime. She believes in stop and search. She is visceral about her condemnation of how she believes Sadiq Khan is responsible for the soaring violent crime in London and the way he's been the mayor. So she doesn't like him, that's for sure. Anti-Khan, she had me at anti-Khan. Now, because of her stance on various policies, she doesn't believe in the race to zero for a start. She prefers Reform's policy on that, which is to scrap it. That doesn't mean to say we're all going to go mad not being kind to the environment. It means that the race to zero is pointless, running at 1%, and we can do other things. So she sounds sensible to me. She's got 7 kids. She's a working mum. She's a Muslim. And people have gone overboard on Twitter posting about how they would never vote for a Muslim, and Muslim this, Muslim that, Muslim everything. So therefore you have to believe that all of them are bad. Is that what you want? Is that what you actually believe? All of them are bad? Because there's a lot of you queuing up to see your GP and you know he's a Muslim. And there's a lot of people, you know, paramedics. There's a lot of people in the health service that we trust. I can't get over how people will condemn this online and yet show themselves having the favourite meal at their favourite curry house, going in an Uber and ordering stuff from Deliveroo. I don't understand that logic. To calm it down and not make excuses, I'm not making excuses, I'm calming it down. She's a good candidate because the trouble is Sadiq Khan has got London by the balls, and he's got it by the balls because of the saturation of Muslim population. But if you could get someone in that could basically deplete his voter share, take it away from him, what better candidate than someone that voter share isn't going to be afraid of? But someone who has better morals about crime. She wants small, what they call smaller crimes, prosecuting, like shoplifting. You know, the ones that they don't get prosecuted for. You've seen them all wandering in and out, Eastern Europeans and the rest, wandering in and out supermarkets, nicking bottles of wine because it's under 20 quid, they can just walk out, nobody does anything. People shoveling crisps and toothpaste and all sorts into sacks and going out of stores. That doesn't get prosecuted. A shop in Wimbledon has been repeatedly raided. An expensive clothes shop where they've just run in and took stuff, hangers included, even when they're on security rails, just rip it off the wall, causing damage, and run out, and they're not being prosecuted. So what does that do? That encourages the business owner to pull out of business. So she's anti-violent crime. She wants to prosecute small crimes. She was a rising star in the Crown Prosecution Services. Apparently she was very disheartened by the slowness of the Conservative Party to tackle the grooming gang issue and not have an inquiry. That was back when the Conservatives were in. So this woman who does not wear a headscarf, you know, looks a bit kind of Mediterranean-y to me. She's obviously very articulate and clever. I think she could steal it off Khan. I think if there's anybody going to nick it off him, it could be her. She's not been verified as a candidate. I'm just jumping the gun here because you can think what you want about me, but I am pretty grounded and I will not lead you up the garden path. And I do understand fully concerns when you think of how we have been with Islamic attacks from the extremists and how this is it's a red wall for some people. Oh no, I can't go there. I can't, not if she's from that background. But she's a good-looking young woman, long hair, attractive, no headscarf. She's got a good track record, been very outspoken on Westminster Council, against ULEZ, against mass migration, against knife crime, pro stop and search, wants to prosecute shoplifting and smaller crimes, and she's got basically the legal background to see it through. I don't know whether she'll be any good. I don't know whether she'll even be chosen. I'm just being ahead of the game here with what's being talked about, particularly on, as I say, social media, on Twitter. You know, there's a lot of people out there want to make a name for themselves, want to make a bit of this. Because this, YouTube, Twitter, it's their only income. I don't know. I'm not a sensationalist. Don't come here for sensationalism. I wouldn't like to run a party that has to navigate these waters right now. Bear in mind, there's a chunk of people on the left still trying to call Reform a racist party. Now a lot of you be complaining about my stance, but even I got a message yesterday calling me a thick. I just support parties who don't like brown faces. How you can come to that conclusion when Zia Yusuf is a volunteer there and being the chair, and when they're looking at this woman as a possible candidate, how you can even think that when they've got Sikhs. Sikhs has former candidates and council candidates. How you can think that about Reform is literally beyond me, because I think Reform is trying to create a broad church so that basically British taxpayers are welcome. And the child benefit cap, it's only if both parents are working. And a lot of these families that we're afraid of, these that have come in, and a lot from Eastern Europe, don't forget, a lot of Bulgarians and Romanians, not just from further afield, are renowned for having big families and not working. There's a huge percentage. So the child benefit cap lift is aimed at the families where both parents are working. You have to be joint British taxpayers to benefit from lifting the two-child benefit cap, and that's a point that not a lot of people understand. Anyway, that's today's insight, if you can call it insight. I did go on Connor Tomlinson's thread, who was banging on like a 1970s racist. And I just put, seriously? You can't do better than, you can't think outside the box. The benefits that this woman might have trying to unseat the man who's glued to the seat. I mean, I can't stand Khan. I think he's I think he's absolutely ruined London. You've got, you know, signs on the street about not defecating in the street, aimed at humans, not people walking the dogs, aimed at bloody humans. That's where London is today. People driving around on mopeds with machetes in the backpacks. I prefer the old days when you only saw machetes in a bloody Tarzan film. I'm that old, I can remember that. They were like jungle knives. They weren't for like street cred kids. You know, people having their hands super glued around lampposts while they get bloody mugged. You know, they should have one of those tour guides, shouldn't they? Showing outlines of what bodies are with stabbings and acid attacks. You know, come on tour bus, we'll show you what last ones were. I actually would never go to London. I get invited to loads of things in London and I don't go. I don't think it's for me. But anyway, that's the update. And as I say, I make these videos because it's important to me that you don't sit there stewing, because there's so much to actually stew about. And I've got some lovely messages back from people saying that they're glad they found the channel, that I'm rational and grounded, and that they're not as afraid. There's nothing to, you don't need to sit here being afraid. If you listen to social media, they'll have you think we're on the brink of a civil war. And the media want to do that as well, because, wow, That is absolutely, that's real good clickbait stuff, that is. And this is while the government are trying to drag us into one with the European Union. I'm going to do another video about Keir Starmer. It's a cracker. I should tag it onto this really, but I'll do it separately in case you've got fed up with me talking about this London thing.